The message that shook the stars. The Vorn Dominion had conquered 47 star systems in less than 3 centuries. Their military doctrine was efficient, their technology superior, and their confidence absolute. When their long-range scanners identified a blue-green world orbiting a yellow star in the outer spiral arm, the Strategic Council barely spent an hour in deliberation. Earth was chosen. Commander Draven Porrel stood on the bridge of the Celestial Hammer, his flagship, studying the holographic display of the target planet. The data streams painted a picture of a species barely worth the fuel costs of the journey. They had primitive rockets that could barely leave their own atmosphere. Their world was divided into hundreds of competing nations. Their weapons were chemical-based, laughably inefficient. "They still burn fossil fuels," his tactical officer noted with something close to amusement. Draven allowed himself a thin smile. This would be the easiest conquest of his career. Perhaps he would be home before the season changed on his homeworld. The standard protocol was followed. A single message, transmitted in 200 languages simultaneously, delivered directly to every communication device on the planet. "People of Earth, you have been selected for integration into the Vorn Dominion. Surrender is mandatory. Resistance is extinction. You have 72 hours to respond with unconditional capitulation. Choose wisely." Draven expected the usual response patterns. First, denial, then panic, then desperate attempts at negotiation, finally, surrender. It always followed the same arc. Fear was predictable. What he did not expect was silence for the first hour. Then activity, frantic activity. Every major nation on Earth went into emergency sessions. The primitive communication networks lit up like stars being born. But there was no response to the Vorn transmission. Not for 2 full hours. When the response finally arrived, it arrived as a single, unified message. Not from one nation, but from all of them. A collective voice representing 8 billion humans speaking as one. That alone should have been the first warning. Draven activated the translation matrix and began reading. His tactical officer did the same. Within seconds, the quiet confidence on the bridge began to shift. "To the Vorn Dominion, we received your message. We understand your terms. We reject them entirely." Draven frowned. Defiance was not uncommon in the first response. It would pass. "You have studied our world and found us weak. You see our divisions and assume we are easy prey. You observe our technology and believe yourselves superior. You notice we have not left our solar system and conclude we are primitive. These observations are accurate. These conclusions are not." The tactical officer looked up from his display, uncertainty crossing his features for the first time in years. The message continued. "You are correct that we fight among ourselves. We have been doing so for our entire recorded history. We have waged war in every conceivable way, with stones, with steel, with fire, with weapons that can erase cities in seconds. We have fought over land, resources, ideas, and gods. We have studied the art of killing our own species with a dedication that would terrify you. But you have made a critical error in your assessment. You see our wars and think we are weak. We see our wars and know we are ready." Draven felt something cold settle in his chest. This was not the language of surrender. Every conflict we have endured has taught us something. We learned strategy from Sun Tzu 25 centuries ago. We learned total war from generations of global conflicts. We learned resilience from enemies who tried to break us and failed. We learned that humans do not surrender even when logic demands it, especially when logic demands it. You believe you are giving us a choice. You are not. You are giving us clarity. The bridge had gone completely silent. Every officer was reading the transmission now, disbelief spreading like a virus through the command crew. For the first time in our history, every human nation agrees on something. We will not kneel. You have united a species that has never been truly united.
You have given 8 billion people a common enemy. We do not know if we can win. We suspect we cannot. But we know with absolute certainty that we will fight. You have 72 hours to leave our solar system. If you do not, you will learn what humanity becomes when we stop fighting each other and start fighting together. You will discover what 8 billion survivors of 10,000 wars can do when we have nothing left to lose. This is not a negotiation. This is not bravado. This is a promise. We are waiting. The message ended with coordinates, precise locations of the Vorn fleet, accurate to within meters. Somehow, impossibly, Earth had tracked them across the void of space, despite their stealth technology. Commander Draven Coral stared at the display for a long moment. Around him, his officers waited for orders, for reassurance, for the confident dismissal of an empty threat. He had conquered worlds before. He had seen fear in 1,000 different forms across 100 different species. He knew what prey looked like. This was not prey. This was something else entirely. For the first time in 3 centuries of Vorn expansion, a target world had responded to their ultimatum with a counter-ultimatum. For the first time, Draven felt the ice-cold touch of doubt. His tactical officer broke the silence with the question everyone was thinking. "Commander, what are your orders?" Draven's hand hovered over the communication controls. Protocol was clear. Defiance was met with overwhelming force. The fleet would advance. The conquest would proceed. But something in that message, that calm, unified, terrifying message, made him hesitate. The humans were right about one thing. They had just united a species that had never been united before. And the Vorn Dominion was about to find out what that meant. The Council of War. The emergency session of the Vorn High Command convened within hours of receiving Commander Coral's report. 13 fleet admirals materialized as holographic projections around the circular chamber, their forms shimmering in the low light of the war room. At the center stood Supreme Admiral Thane Vorix, a veteran of 60 campaigns and architect of the Dominion's greatest victories. He had never lost a war. "Explain this," Vorix said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. The human message played again on the central display, each word hanging in the air like a weapon. Commander Coral's image flickered at the edge of the circle. "Supreme Admiral, the response is unprecedented. No conquered species has ever—" "I can read," Vorix interrupted. "What I want to know is whether this changes our operational assessment." Admiral Kreven, commander of the Third Fleet, leaned forward. "With respect, it's a bluff. They're primitives trying to intimidate us with words because they lack the weapons to do anything else. We've seen this before." "Have we?" Admiral Sorath spoke quietly. "Name one species that tracked our stealth fleet from beyond their own planet's orbit. Name one species that unified 8 billion individuals in 2 hours. Name one species that studied warfare for thousands of years before achieving spaceflight." Silence answered her. Vorix studied the data streams flowing across his tactical display. Earth's technological profile was indeed primitive by the Dominion standards. But the more he read, the more uncomfortable patterns emerged. "They have 13,000 active nuclear weapons," he said. "Why?" "Internal conflicts," Kreven offered, "aimed at each other." 13,000, Vorix repeated, "enough to render their own world uninhabitable several times. What species builds that many weapons of extinction and doesn't use them?" The question lingered unanswered. "They've had the capability to destroy themselves completely for over 80 years, Sorath added. "Yet they're still here. That suggests either remarkable restraint or something more concerning. They understand deterrence at a level we barely practice." Commander Coral's image shifted. "Supreme Admiral, there's something else. After we received their message, we conducted deeper scans. Earth has orbital platforms we didn't detect in our initial assessment. They're disguised as commercial satellites and space debris. Hundreds of them. Armed? Asked Vorex. We believe so. The energy signatures are subtle, but they're there. They've been building a defense network while appearing to barely have a space program. Admiral Kreven scoffed. Even if true, their technology is centuries behind ours. Orbital platforms won't stop a Dominion battle fleet. Perhaps not, Sorth said, but it means they've been preparing for us, or for someone like us. They expected this day would come.
Vorex pulled up historical combat data from previous conquests. Every species the Dominion had subjugated showed similar patterns: divided governments, regional conflicts, developing technology. But there was always a breaking point, a moment when the conquered realized resistance was futile. He found no precedent for a species that had spent its entire history perfecting the art of killing its own kind, then suddenly directing that collective expertise outward. "Show me their wars," he commanded. The displays shifted, showing archived human history pulled from their own data networks. The images were disturbing. Trenches filled with dead soldiers from something called the First World War. Cities erased in atomic fire from the Second. Endless conflicts across every continent, spanning millennia. But it wasn't the violence that troubled Vorex. It was the pattern. They never stopped learning. Every defeat became a lesson. Every victory became a foundation for the next strategy. They studied their own failures with obsessive detail, documenting every mistake, every breakthrough, every innovation in tactics and technology. "They have more words for war than we do," Sorth observed quietly. "They have entire academic fields devoted to studying conflict, military history, strategic studies, game theory, psychological warfare. They've made a science of destruction." "They're also fractured," Kreven insisted. "Hundreds of nations, thousands of cultures, dozens of languages. Unity is impossible for them." "Was impossible," Sorth corrected. "Until 2 hours ago." Vorex made his decision. "Commander Coral, proceed to the edge of their solar system. Full battle readiness, but do not enter engagement range. We probe their defenses first." "Supreme Admiral," Carl's surprise was evident. "This is not cowardice, Commander. This is prudence. We will learn what they can do before we commit to a full assault. If their defenses are as primitive as we believe, the conquest proceeds as planned." "And if they're not?" Sorth asked. Vorex's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. "Then we adjust our approach. The Dominion has survived for 5,000 years because we don't underestimate our enemies. We won't start now." The council dissolved, leaving Vorex alone in the war room. He pulled up the human message once more, reading it slowly. "We do not know if we can win. We suspect we cannot. But we know with absolute certainty that we will fight." In his 60 campaigns, Vorex had broken species that begged for mercy. He had crushed civilizations that offered everything they had to avoid war. He had never faced an enemy that openly acknowledged they would probably lose and chose to fight anyway. That wasn't bravado. That was something far more dangerous. That was conviction. He thought of the Dominion's own history, their rise to power through calculated conquest and overwhelming force. They had always chosen battles they could win. They had always attacked the weak and avoided the strong. But the humans didn't have that luxury. They were the weak, and they were preparing to fight the strong anyway. Vorex touched to control, bringing up deployment orders. The fleet would move into position within days. The conquest would proceed.
But for the first time in his long career, he wondered if the cost of victory might be higher than anticipated. The humans had made one thing abundantly clear in their message. They understood they were facing extinction, and they had chosen to make it as expensive as possible. The question that troubled him most was simple. What could a species do in its final days if it had nothing left to lose and 8 billion minds focused on a single goal? He suspected he was about to find out. And that suspicion felt uncomfortably like fear. The calm before. Earth had 72 hours. Humanity used every second. In Geneva, the Emergency United Nations Assembly remained in permanent session. Delegates who had spent careers arguing over borders and trade agreements now spoke with a unity that would have seemed impossible days before. The resolution passed unanimously in 4 minutes, a record that would have been remarkable if anyone had time to appreciate it. Every resource on Earth was being redirected. Every factory, every laboratory, every military installation operated at maximum capacity. The word overtime lost all meaning when the alternative was extinction. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the operations center beneath NORAD, surrounded by screens showing real-time data from every corner of the planet. She had been awake for 36 hours, sustained by coffee and the peculiar clarity that comes from knowing exactly what's at stake. "Status report," she said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion. "Orbital platforms are at 93% activation," reported Colonel James Okafor, his Nigerian accent crisp even through the fatigue. "They will," Chen said. "The moment we power up targeting solutions, their sensors will catch it. We get one surprise, one chance to make it count. Manufacturing facilities have converted to military production worldwide," added General Park from the Korean sector. "We're producing ammunition, replacement parts, and drone components 24 hours a day. It won't be enough, but it's more than they expect us to have." Chen pulled up the fleet tracking data. The Vorn ships had moved to the edge of the solar system, just beyond Jupiter's orbit, close enough to be threatening, far enough to maintain strategic flexibility. "They're being cautious," she observed. "That's good. It means our message worked." "Or they're just positioning for a better strike," Okafor countered. "We bought time, not victory." "Time is all we need," Chen replied. "Every hour they wait is another hour we prepare." On the other side of the planet, in a bunker beneath Moscow, Colonel Yuri Volkov reviewed the same data with his own tactical team. The Americans, the Chinese, the Europeans, the Africans, everyone was sharing intelligence now. Every secret, every technology, every strategic advantage was laid bare in the face of a common threat. It should have felt like weakness, this sudden transparency. Instead, it felt like strength. "The submarines are in position," his second-in-command reported, "all 47 of them, carrying our complete nuclear arsenal. They're scattered across the Pacific, the Atlantic, and the Arctic. If the Vorn managed to strike our land-based facilities, we still have the capability to respond." Volkov nodded. The strategy was simple. Make Earth too expensive to take. If the Vorn wanted this planet, they would have to break it first. And a broken world was worthless for colonization. Mutually assured destruction, the doctrine that had prevented human nuclear war for decades, was about to be tested against an alien empire. In Beijing, General Wu Lin coordinated with military leaders across Asia. China's manufacturing capability had pivoted entirely to defense production. Drones, missiles, kinetic weapons, anything that could be produced quickly and deployed en masse.
They have superior technology, Wu Lin told his staff. But technology requires maintenance, fuel, and time. If we can sustain losses and keep fighting, we create a resource drain they didn't anticipate. We make this conquest too expensive to justify. General, one of his officers said quietly, "We're preparing for a war we cannot win." Wu Lin looked at the young officer, barely 25, with a family he would probably never see again. "No," he corrected, "we're preparing for a war we cannot afford to lose. There's a difference." In orbit, aboard the International Space Station, Commander Elena Volkov, no relation to the colonel in Moscow, watched the Vorn ships through the station's enhanced telescopes. The alien ships were magnificent, terrible, and impossibly advanced. She and her crew of 12 had been given the option to evacuate, to return to Earth and spend their final days with loved ones. They had all refused. "If they come," she had told ground control, "we're the first line of defense. We don't abandon the line." Now she floated in the cupola, watching the distant glints of alien metal and wondering how long they had. Days? Hours?
Back in the NORAD bunker, Dr. Chen received another update. The Vorn fleet is repositioning. They're moving closer, but slowly, still 3 days out at current speed. "They're testing us," Okafor said, "seeing if we'll panic, if the unity breaks." Chen pulled up global communication data. The internet had become a single stream of determination. Social media, once filled with arguments and division, now showed families preparing, communities organizing, and people saying goodbye with a grace that surprised even her. There were no riots, no mass panic, just grim preparation and a collective understanding that the end might be coming. "They're not panicking," she said softly. "They're getting ready." "For what?" Okafor asked. "We both know the odds." Chen smiled, a tired but genuine expression. "For the last stand of the human race. And if we're going down fighting smart, fighting together, and making damn sure they remember us." The countdown continued. 46 hours until the Vorn deadline. Earth didn't wait. Earth prepared. And in the cold void of space, Commander Draven Coral watched the planet below with growing unease. His scanners detected the increased activity, the military preparations, the synchronized movements of a species that should be fragmenting in fear. Instead, they were coalescing into something he didn't recognize, something that looked disturbingly like an army.